his passion and dedication to keep things going during this pandemic. But we're here today. There you go. We're here in Cobb County today, 7 minutes from Truist Park, to talk about the economic impact of the misguided decision by Major League Baseball to move the All-Star Game from Cobb County. You know, what's become clear to Georgians and all across America is that Major League Baseball committed a big league error. You know, their knee-jerk reaction to what clearly was a made-up narrative from Stacey Abrams and her supporters, from President Biden, from our 2 United States senators, and so many others about Georgia's election reform bill leads to one thing: real harm. Real harm to Georgia businesses, real harm to Georgia families, real harm to Georgia workers. You know, anybody who reads this bill quickly sees that it is about stronger security, expanded access, and greater transparency to allow the public to participate in Georgia's elections. And what anybody who reads this bill also sees is that this made-up narrative, that this bill takes us back to Jim Crow, an era where human beings were being killed and who were truly prevented from casting their vote, is preposterous. It is irresponsible, and it's fundamentally wrong. So again, what does this false narrative, this made-up narrative lead to? It leads to real harm. And the governor's going to talk about it in just a minute, but when you talk about a $100 million impact, and tourism in Georgia is a big issue. Here we've come out of the pandemic, and the tourism industry and hospitality and restaurants have been impacted. And what to me is amazing is and hypocritical is those on the other side who are creating this false narrative are purporting to want to help those that are being disproportionately impacted by this decision. People of color, folks that own, minority business owners, small business owners. But at the end of the day, when we defend this bill in court, we're not going to use the Stacey Says standard. It's going to be all about the law and the facts. Amen. And with that, it is my great honor to introduce the governor of the great state of Georgia, Brian Kemp.
Well, thank you, General Carr, for that. And I first want to just thank Andy and his team for having us today to really highlight the economic impact. And I appreciate Chris talking about the bill. I've been saying for a long time now, in Georgia, it's easy to vote and hard to cheat. And we continue to have secure, accessible, fair elections in Georgia. And Senate Bill 202 continues that and does nothing to change that. But today, this is about those empty chairs that this business, that these hardworking Georgians that you can see and some that you cannot, are not going to be privy to because of a bad decision by Major League Baseball. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the economic impact and the effect that it's going to have on places like AJ's and Andy and his team. It's been well documented. This is tens of millions of dollars in revenue. Some estimate around 90 to 100 million. I read something this morning, 8,000, I hadn't really thought about this, but 8,000 hotel bookings that are now gone. And you think about how that money turns that's going into that hotel, into those hardworking Georgians that are working in the hotel, the food that they are buying from their other vendors that are here in Georgia, and so on and so on. The minority-owned businesses that are being hurt in our state. And remember, there has been much documented, and we have been working daily on protecting lives, but also livelihoods. And it's minority-owned businesses that have been hit harder than most because of an invisible virus by no fault of their own. And these are the same minority businesses that are now being impacted by another decision that is by no fault of their own. And it's being moved to a city or from a city in a metro area that is 51% African American to a city that is 10% African American. So who is getting screwed in this? It is the little guy, and it's the minority-owned business. You know, I read something else this morning about a small business person, happens to be African American, that owns a limousine service, talking about how devastating this decision of moving the game is. You can think the same for Uber drivers in Uber Eats that would have been ordering food, delivering it to hotel rooms from places like this, or people that would be coming here. You think about the trickle-down effect, and this is what Andy and I were just talking about in the back, and I haven't really thought about this too much, quite honestly, but it makes perfect sense from someone that's a small business owner like me that was in the construction business, that bought from, you know, lumber yards and electric supply houses and plumbing companies and so on. Well, the same thing's happening here. Because of the empty chairs that they're going to have, because of a bad decision by no fault of their own, AJ's is not going to be ordering more seafood from Inland Seafood and other vendors that are right here in the state of Georgia. They're not going to be ordering more bread that we just walked by from the local bakery in Lawrenceville, and so on. Produce. I mean, you can go on and on of how that economic impact is not just hurting Andy's and AJ's, but it's hurting a lot of other people that you don't even realize or even think about. But I will tell you, we are thinking about them, and we are going to continue to fight for the truth, because I believe that we are on the right side of helping the little guy and the little person in this fight, because they are the hardworking Georgians, by no fault of their own, that have gotten hit from COVID-19, and now they're getting hit by a decision that they had no control over. And that's not right. And we're going to continue to let people know that. So thank you all for being here, and we're glad to answer any questions.
Governor, I think this is good to Attorney General Chris Carr too, but
Thank the Lord.
what message do you have for economic development and companies who might be looking to expand in Georgia, who are worried about the reputational hit this
Well, I'll let Chris say what he wants, but I've been very outspoken on that. We got, for those of you that are not from Georgia or don't normally follow the business environment in the state of Georgia from around the country, we've been the #1 state in the country for business for 8 years in a row, and I believe that we still are. And it's because of our policies that have been supported by the executive branch and members and leadership of the Georgia General Assembly for many, many years. When you go back to thinking about the policies of Governor Sonny Perdue, Governor Nathan Deal, and the first years of our administration. And even coming out of the pandemic, I just read an interesting article this morning about our GDP and our economic development numbers versus other states in the country that had continuous lockdowns, that didn't do measured reopenings as we did, and didn't give hardworking Georgians the opportunity to fight through this virus and simply survive and do two things: protect lives and livelihoods. That has created an enormous amount of pent-up demand for people to look to invest and to grow in our state. We are setting records this year, right now, in number of jobs created, number of investment in the middle of a global pandemic. That is the environment we have. I don't believe these decisions are going to hurt us, but I will tell you that is one reason I'm fighting so hard for people to know the truth, not only about the bill and what's in it and what it does, like General Carr said, expanding access, but also further securing the vote so that we have secure, accessible, fair elections in our state. But it's also given me the opportunity to talk about this business environment. Our ports are growing. We're seeing our tourism and hospitality industry coming back. The service industry jobs, like those at AJ's, that are getting hit by such a ridiculous decision as this, and we'll continue to do that.
There's nobody that is more pro-business in Georgia not named Brian Kemp or Pat Wilson than me. But what's happened is these companies have been misguided, and I would just encourage them to look at the facts. Because if you are looking to make a major decision about where to invest that next dollar, to create that next job or invest that next dollar of investment, you need to base that on the facts. It needs to be based on the workforce that we have, and Hartsfield-Jackson, and the ports, and the university system, and the logistics network. It cannot be based on a made-up narrative, because none of us would be standing here if we did not believe that what we did strengthened security, expanded access, and improved transparency to the electoral process in Georgia. There you go. I would remind everybody that in 2018, in that election, when Stacey Abrams lost, she and her supporters said that there were problems with the electoral process. There was a crisis in confidence in the electoral process. There were problems that needed to be addressed. We had it in 2020 with folks that were on our side, maybe some behind us, that were concerned about the electoral process. We addressed it. And if anybody reads that bill and sees what it actually does, they will see that Georgia is exactly what we have been. And we have created an environment in this state where the private sector and the public sector comes together to create opportunities, to make it the #1 state in the nation in which to live, work, and play.
And I would remind people as well that this economy in Georgia is built off the backs of small business, just like AJ's. They're the ones that are buying from these larger corporations in many instances, a lot of their different products. And I don't want to name names and put people on the spot, but 90 to 95% of the businesses in Georgia hire less than 50 people. Those are the folks that drive our economy. They know what this is about, and they understand the environment, and they also now fully understand the truth about Senate Bill 202.
Yeah, Governor, I have a question. Before the Major League Baseball, just a remarks we are going to read Atlanta. They had a contract with a Chinese technological company. Do you think that's part of the Chinese Communist Party regime's influence? Are you planning to target them while you are trying to help the small business here?
Well, I wouldn't want to speak to something that I don't know about the whole conversation, but it is very hypocritical in some regards that they're targeting a bill that expands access, further secures the vote in Georgia, but they're also willing to do business with countries like China and consider playing or going to play baseball in countries like Cuba. I mean, it's almost like, how do you add those two things up?
Governor, is AJ's minority-owned or their minority-owned business owners with you today to speak about how they're being negatively impacted?
I mean, I'll let AJ speak to that. I don't believe his business is minority-owned. There's certainly a lot of minority, hard-working Georgians working in AJ's business. I'm not sure who all we got behind the crowd. I know we have some great leaders in our Republican Party here and other folks. But I mean, I was talking about a minority-owned business earlier that was quoted in an article I read this morning. It's the transportation company.
Governor, it seems both sides are entrenched in their thinking on this. You present this false narrative that's being projected from Democrats or left-leaning. Meanwhile, you're saying this bill expands the right, the access to vote and secures elections. How do you guys find common ground moving forward when it seems it's so polarized?
Well, let me be clear. The truth is on our side. I have stood now and done 64 interviews, have answered any question that anybody had about the specifics of the bill. General Carr's willing to do that as well, and many other legislative leaders, because they know how this process went. They know that the government affairs folks from Coca-Cola and from Delta and a lot of other businesses in Georgia were at the table, like a lot of other people were that had concerns and wanted things done in this piece of legislation. And the idea of them going out there and calling this Jim Crow You know, President Biden said this is Jim Crow on steroids. What it is a big lie on steroids. And Joe Biden knows it. Stacey Abrams knows it. And the CEOs from other parts of the country that are living in states that are more restrictive than ours are, that are making and pressuring these people to make decisions like Major League Baseball did, they should know it too, unless they have a different agenda, which I believe that they do. And that is to pass H.R. 1 and S.R. 1, which is an unconstitutional federal mandate to have nationalized elections. Our founders set the system up for the states to run elections to prevent foreign interference. Hundreds of years ago, they did that. And it is still prevalent today, which is why I believe that the states should make their own voting laws. And I have said long before I was governor, I supported the rights for states to do that. Even when states like California may have same-day voter registration, not check citizenship when people register to vote, states that mail everybody a ballot, so you have no, in my opinion, ballot security on that, the way it's done. But, you know, I respect that. That's what the Constitution says. They have the ability to do that. But I do not want people to come to our state and say, you can't have a voter ID requirement. Even though it's free in Georgia, you still can't have that. You can't check citizenship. You can't keep your voter rolls secure. You can't start online voter registration where anybody in Georgia can register to vote 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I did that years ago. But we don't need to. But no state needs the federal government telling them that.
Would you support a boycott of these companies like Coca-Cola that have done this? Coca-Cola's been here, started here, and been here for 100 years, and they've done this. Is it time that the rest of us stood up and did something rather than be sheep and let these companies do this?
No tax.
Well, I would be. I wouldn't want to be taking a question or have somebody out there thinking that you're calling me sheepish, because I certainly have not been on this issue. But look, I'm also, you know, I haven't called on any boycotts either. I'll let consumers make their decision. But look, that's what's so, to me, that's what's so sad about all this. You know, especially for people that don't really care about the polarized state of politics that we have in our state and our country right now. And sometimes that's by no fault of our own, but sometimes it is. And I understand that. But what's sad to me is a kid that grew up playing baseball from, you know, minor league, little league, played in high school, played Legion ball, thought about playing in college and realized I wasn't near as good as I thought I was. And somebody that's a fan today, I mean, I've been an avid Braves fan, baseball fan, that game, the great American pastime, has now been politicized. And our kids are going to have to grow up, and our parents that are going to the game, you know, people shouldn't have to go to a game and worry about if they're sitting next to a Joe Biden supporter or a Donald Trump supporter. They ought to be able to go to the game. Cheer for their team, just like if you're in church worshiping. I mean, I know when I go to church, some people may worry about church politics and national politics, but I don't really do that. I'm there for another reason.
Amen.
And that's why people are doing the same thing in sports, and that's the way it should be. And thankfully, there's been a lot of sports that have not gotten pressured into weighing into this by a bunch of activists that I will tell you, you will never make them happy. It will only lead to another demand.
Yep.
And that's what's so bad. Shelley?
I would like to ask Attorney General Carr, do you think that the lawsuits will wind their way through the courts before 2022 elections?
There's no telling kind of what the timeline will be, but it'll make its way through the process, and we'll end up defending it. We've got 5 right now, and I don't want to speak to the specifics of any one, but it'll make its way through the process. Tough to tell what the timeline will be.
One more, last one right here.
In the beginning of your statement, you said the goal is to make it easy to vote, hard to cheat. So just in order to highlight both sides, in the 2020 election, there was more opportunity in regards to being open for people to vote in different areas, in regards to mail-in routes, all those things. And the Democratic Party feels as though some of that's being taken away with these restrictions. What do you have to say to the people who are saying, in 2020, you said there was no cheating in that election? So how does that sort of correspond with what you're saying?
Well, I'm not understanding really what your question is.
Well,
It's kind of
easy to vote, hard to cheat.
Okay, easy to vote. First of all, this bill expands additional opportunities to vote early in Georgia, especially on the weekends. Every single Democrat voted against that. Also, if you really look at the bill and how the legislature, based on what happened in the last elections, to make sure that we're treating everyone equally, which is what the Democrats always talk about and target, quite honestly, many times ridiculously, Republicans with. They did that with voting times, hours of operations, and other things. So when you look at the formula, 134 out of 159 counties will now offer more hours of early voting under this legislation. Just for the record, we have 17 days mandatory in-person early voting in Georgia. This bill adds an additional Saturday, where all 159 counties now will have 2 Saturdays of voting. They have the option to open 2 additional Sundays. So you could have a county that elects to have 19 days of in-person early voting. Now that's not counting how early you can ask for and receive an absentee ballot by mail. And in comparison to Delaware, President Joe Biden's home state, right now, no early voting days. I think they're going to have a few when their bill becomes law, but they're just now doing that. New York, where Major League Baseball is headquartered, has 10 days of early voting. So we have a week to 9 days more of early voting than New York. New Jersey and New York, I get these confused sometimes, but one of those states you have to have an excuse to vote early. You do not have to do that in Georgia. So clearly this bill makes it easy to vote, but also hard to cheat, because we're protecting the security of the ballot. We had a 351% increase in absentee by mail, which made an arbitrary process more arbitrary, slowed it down, made it less efficient. County elections officials that I talked to, and I've worked and know many of them, said the voter ID requirement or the numbers from a voter ID, which is free, you can use your social security number and other things, will speed up that process, make it more efficient so we can have more timely results, which everyone wants, and keeps doubt out of the process, but also will make it more secure.
Thank you.
Guys, we gotta go.
Specific instances of cheating